herzlich willkommen zum Fotomuseum Winterthur. Mein Name ist Duncan Forbes, ich bin der Direktor des Museums. Ich wechsle hier auf Englisch, weil alles heute Abend findet auf Englisch statt. Very warm welcome to our English-speaking guests this evening. I know we have quite a lot of English-speaking guests here. Welcome to the Fotomuseum. I have a microphone not for my voice but for the camera, so I'm still going to shout a little bit at you. I'm not going to say very much tonight, apart from a couple of things. This program here, our Situations program, has now been running for a year, in fact. It's been a very quick process. We've done 37 or 38 situations. And one of the ideas behind Situations was that we could work very quickly and react very dynamically to some of the latest developments in photography. And I'm very pleased that we're able to stage this program tonight in relation to game photography and in-game photography. I think we're probably one of the very first photo museums ever to stage an exhibition like this. So I'm very pleased that we should be doing this within the Situations format. I'd in particular like to welcome our guest this evening, Roc Herms. Thank you, Roc. It's good to see you here. And Matteo Bittanti, thank you very much for coming. And there's one other thing I want to say, which is a very big thank you to the people that have helped organize this event, in particular Marco de Mutiis, who has curated this. Marco, thank you very much indeed. I know you've had a strong interest in this field for a while, and I'd in particular like to thank the rest of the team here, the guys that built the show. I'd like to thank Tom for his work on the electrical side, Angela and others, but also in particular to Doris Gassett, who played quite a big role in putting the online presentation together. That's it from me. We're a small group, so I think we can be very informal, and if you want to get involved in the discussion, please feel free to do so. So I'll hand over to Marco.
Thanks. Yeah, I really like this symbolic microphone that we use for camera. So yeah, I'm Marco de Mutiis. I'm digital curator of the Fotomuseum Winterthur. Thanks for coming here today to this opening of the play cluster of Situations. As Duncan has mentioned, Situation turned roughly 1 year today or this month. And this idea of having this space here for exploring what photography is becoming or post-photographic practices revolves around many different clusters, and today we're exploring this idea of play. So we made this conceptual cluster of works around different practices of games and play and how they relate to photography. I think that we tried to look at it in a sort of open way, both looking at new photographic gameplays or new ways that photography can be considered as play, but we also looked at photography at new playing practices. Maybe I'm looking at you because maybe it would be nice to start by, since we have the luck of having you here, by looking at your work, and if you could maybe introduce your work to everyone here today. Roc Herms, I should say, maybe is a photographer from Spain that we had the luck to have for a platform already, and he was, I think you were the first one that responded to our call of the open call for in-game photography last April. Mm-hmm. So it's quite also a nice birthday for us as well. Oh, you have your microphone.
Okay, but that's more.
This is like
what happened? No, okay.
Yeah, no, it's
you are in the middle. You are
the moderator.
Okay, so I'm Roc. I come from Barcelona, and I want to say thanks to Marco and all the staff of the Fotomuseum. And actually, what he was saying now is it's true that. They opened this Situations program through the webpage, and actually it was like the first time I saw a museum focusing on this practice that usually for me it was quite difficult to fit somewhere or to find some kind of institution that puts a like on the kind of stuff that I think I do. And afterwards, I sent some images there, and I got in contact with Marco. I sent him some work, and afterwards, I was invited for the platform review. And now I'm here, and I don't know what will be next, but if this continues this way, looks amazing.
So your work is called Yo Yo Yo,
Haha.
and is the work that starts.
In the black room. Yeah, this project, I did grow up like playing video games, and I kept playing them, and I think I will keep playing them. And this project, it's a 5 years documentary project held in Valencia. Valencia is a city in Spain, and every year they make like a huge LAN party. A LAN party is an event where people gather with their computers and they stay for a week connected to each other. And well, like the thing is that the people who go there are users or persons very related to digital culture, internet, video games, all this stuff. And they are not just gamers. There's people interested in robotics. There's people interested in free software. There's people interested in astronomy or some kind of what we call geeks in a way, that I'm one of them. I went there with my camera. Some of them were building robots and I was taking pictures there. And during those 5 years, they appeared like different approaches, and in a way I did try to put the different series that came out in this place. But I have to spoil what's inside?
Don't spoil.
Don't spoil.
I don't know how many people have already seen the installation.
Almost
I guess
everyone.
one.
Okay. No, the main subject maybe it's this pile of computers that I did always realize that nowadays that we spend a lot of time in front of the computer. That in Spain I think it's like the medium is like 7.5 hours, and I think that when we spend this time in front of the computer, we are more or less living inside of the computer, that we are living in this digital space, being video games or being Facebook or being Gmail, or that it's a digital environment where we relate to each other. And I always saw the desktop of the users as a kind of portrait of the guy who's behind the screen. And one of the years I've been like collecting all the desktops of their users, and this installation, it's a slideshow of 150 user desktops. There's also, in this network, the 8,000 people are connected, and there's a chat room where there are the digital or virtual interactions, and there are like 24 hours. I did grab 24 hours of the conversations that were going in this site. And now there's this set of portraits when people are going outside the event and they rediscover the sun in a way that they made me understand like this door as a frontier between the digital wall and the physical wall. And I don't know, I hope you enjoy it, and more or less this is the work. There's also, that became a book that is on the bookshop that I self-published by myself, and this exhibition is like a transformation of the project to a physical space.
So yeah, I think that what is really interesting, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that, is this idea of making a portrait of play, or portrait of this experience of playing together through these LAN networks in this huge context, in this context of these huge parties, through screenshots, basically. So these desktop wallpapers somehow, for you, as you said, are kind of a portrait, right? We talked during these days when you were here to set up about this idea of digital photography, and how you said that this is the real digital photography, right?
The thing.
The screenshot is the real digital photography.
No, because I have another project that it happens inside a virtual wall, something like Second Life. It's a 3D environment where you can move around, when you can look, and I think that moving around, looking, framing, and capturing what you are looking, it's what photography is in essence. So many of those works, even they don't happen in the physical world, they happen in the digital, but they are environments where, as a photographer, you have to move around, you have to look, and you have to frame and capture something. And if I understand photography as the act of looking, framing, and capturing, I think that this is as photography, as traditional photography or the photography that happened in the physical world. And I also think that screenshots, in a way, when we talk about digital photography, I think that everything has digitalized, but from the camera to we digitalized the sensor, we digitalized the file, we digitalized everything, but we still photograph the physical world. I mean, what we photograph is still analog in a way. And I think that nowadays that we are spending a lot of time in those digital environments, and not just this, but the screen when we are working, I think that the place where our eyes are living, or the environment where we are seeing and living, we can screenshot a small portion of this screen, and that screenshots in a way can be where everything has been digitalized and also the subject has been digitalized. And that was the idea of the...
So we've gone full cycle,
digitalized.
full digital. Okay. I like this idea of a sort of like a pure digital photography that is totally self-contained in a way.
Yeah,
in
for
the
me,
screen.
maybe that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I think this could be a nice link to ask Matteo. Matteo here, just a little introduction maybe. Matteo is the guy behind the game art notion, let's say, the pioneer in a way, or at least if we see, we have in this small bibliography that we compiled a few of his articles and also his books that he edited with Domenico Quaranta. Is also, I think that we probably don't have enough time to say all the things that you are, artist, curator, writer, and I think you're now also you're teaching at ULM Milan at, it's a game
It's called
studies.
Gameplay. It's a master program in game design that we're launching in October, and I'm like shamelessly promoting right now. If you guys want to become a game designer, ask me.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe it would be interesting to talk a little bit about this phenomenon of how games and photography kind of met. We have seen recently these photo modes that appeared in all these games, and from, I think, famously The Last of Us and on PlayStation 4 and many others. And even before, we've seen this practice of what became known as in-game photography. Can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe, if you can introduce it the way that you see where it comes from and how that deals with games and play.
Sure. This is probably the part where I should say that talking in front of an audience freaks me out. So, I apologize in advance if I'm just going to stumble and crash and burn.
Okay, I have a microphone that doesn't work.
Okay, so the question was, okay, I think you did an incredible job by contextualizing and providing an historical overview of this phenomenon. Actually, I learned a lot of things by looking at your own research, which made me go back and rethink some notions, some concepts that I I thought were solid. But I think that recently I did a study on a racing game called Forza Horizon 2, right? It's a racing game, right? And you basically race, you buy cars, you go as fast as possible, you try to become rich, pass everybody, etc., etc. But what really impressed me was the photography community. I mean, the gamers spend way more time taking photographs of the scenery than actually racing their cars. And finally, I had this epiphany that probably the meaning behind in-game photography is that so many of these games are really dumb and boring and repetitive, and taking photographs within the game becomes a sort of like a meta game, which is much more compelling and exciting and creative, and people share their photos online, people collect photos, they print them out. Photos become memento of their own experiences because they're so fleeting and transient, and the photograph is like a mark of actually being there. It has also become, as I said, a more creative practice than just collecting cards and winning more and more. And so I'm really fascinated more by the games per se, by the gamers who use the games in creative ways to create. And so there's like this divide between the artists who would actually deal with a specific kind of like circuit, the galleries, the museums, these festivals, but also the gamers themselves, they use photographs online as a sort of like social capital, also gaming capital, as Mia Consalvo defined it, to sort of like as a social lubricant, but also as a way of communicating with other players, using the game as a pretest to actually produce art, produce images,
I think that's interesting what you say about a meta game, but sometimes we see also some effects or some functions of the analog camera being simulated in the game itself. So the game tries to simulate photography. So the gameplay conditions, so to speak, requires you to take pictures.
Right.
Whereas sometimes, as you said, like there is this screenshotting practice, right? That is isolated from the playing of the game.
Right.
And that also relates to what you just said, that if the essence of photography, you said it's framing and looking, then it almost sounds like we have freed photography from the body of the camera. And we just we can talk about photography by simulating the viewfinder, as many times we see that, or is it simulating the aperture function, as you can do in the Gran Turismo photo mode.
Right.
What do you think what makes photography? What aspect of the simulated photography defines it?
For me, it's what I said before, no? Photography, in essence, for me, is that this process of capture an amount of visual information that comes from the environment you are living in. And I think that, and we will see this soon when Oculus Rift and all these virtual devices that will disconnect our eyes from the physical world, and all the information that will be sent to your brain will come from a digital environment. I mean, capturing a part of those information, for me, it will be photography when you make the act of editing and framing and capturing. And in this process of digitalization, the camera disappears, but for me, it's photography in essence, because you are the one who decides what kind of information capture. And actually, I think that that maybe Forza or those that I find more interesting, that there are other environments where people use photography to remember the day that they together spent one evening to go, I don't know, to which mountain to kill whoever, and they stayed together, talking together, and and me as a player, I have some memories of something that happened inside a video game with some friends that I can explain as experiences that I did live in the physical world, and photography will be there to capture and to remember these things, I think.
Do you want to add anything, or?
No, I mean, I completely agree with Roc. I also think that, to paraphrase Slavoj Žižek or George Costanza from Seinfeld, in-game photography is basically photography without photography. It's, you were right. I mean, it's like the essence, the idea of capturing a moment in time. But every time I mention this idea of in-game photography to real photographers, they're terrified, horrified. They just, but it's interesting because, we now live in a post-photography kind of environment, and so how can you justify John Ruffman's activities or Michael Wolff on Doug Rickard, and then disqualifying game photography, because you're both dealing with digital, you're both dealing with like recycling material, things that have been already created, and just framing it in a different way. So,
do you feel that there's a resistance towards games that you don't encounter with Google Street View, for example?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you think that is?
Oh, Michael Wolff just won a few years ago. Won a major prize for a photography project that he did from his room in Paris. Using Google Street View. I haven't seen anybody working with games, having received like major recognition. Even though some of the works that I've seen within game photography is absolutely stunning. Mark Tribe's project, for example, Justin Barry. I mean, they're very sophisticated, conceptually brilliant projects done within game photography that are still, at the periphery of the art world. I mean, it's just a matter of time, but I still see, I mean, John Raffman and, I don't know, Mark Tribe is like, in terms of like recognition, not on quality or value or anything, but just recognition, there's still a huge divide.
And maybe one more thing that we haven't talked about, and it's quite present also in the show, and I'm looking at the big prints behind us and the videos over there, is this practice of artists and gamers in general to, let's say, mod the game or hack the game and make the camera of the game their own and kind of step out of the gameplay. How is that, like, is that also the same level of photographing the screen, or how would you define that in the context of photography? Because to me it looks like it's almost like treating the game engine as the camera, right? So you kind of open up the camera, or you manage to customize the firmware of your camera, or make some tricks to it.
No, I think that the game engine is the place you live, or is the environment where you spend your time, when you do your actions, when you decide where you go, what you look, and this game engine gives you the option to capture what you see. But and maybe the thing is that we are starting to spend more and more time inside not just video games, but inside Facebook, inside those digital environments that are new in a way, and it's that they give us like visual information that we can capture in one way in another, and this is another understanding the game engine as the place or the environment where we stay, and then it's a place where you can capture part of what you see, and here comes photography. But
how do you see the difference between players that use a photo mode and take a screenshot, maybe of a stylistically interesting landscape or a memory, and people who actively modify the games and turn into something else, right? Because I think in the case of DoD here by Canchili, he does this mechanism to twist around the game on its head, and from a shooting game it becomes like a war photojournalism apparatus, somehow a virtual photojournalism platform.
Well, maybe that I don't know, that maybe this kind of practice can also happen in the physical, in a way that people take pictures and they try to explain to you a different thing what you see, or what I don't know exactly how to. No, maybe he can help me.
Nice one. No, I'm completely clueless, but
I think we are all completely clueless in the end. I mean, these are such new phenomena. We're just looking at them, and it's also kind of the spirit of situations.
Right.
It's like, okay, what's happening? What is this? What is photography becoming in this context? So
No, I mean,
no wrong answers.
I mean, it's a very good question. The only way I can answer is by going back to the game that I was talking about, the racing game.
Yeah.
So Forza Motorsport. So I studied the way people take photographs with this game or within this game, and I came out with like basically, I had like a sample of 3,000 photographs during a time frame, and I realized that people basically use this game to take 4 kinds of photographs. The first one is called the selfie, and it's basically you driving this car. And it's usually like in a really big car, really expensive, so just like an aspirational, but it's really about you. And the funny thing is that even though you can drive 10,000 different cars, there's only one avatar, this 20-something white guy. So all the selfies are the same, okay? So it's kind of a circle. The second one is the brand. So it's really about these people taking photographs of the Ferrari horse, or the rigs, or the specific, the Lamborghini's bull. It's all about the brand. So it's basically about status, exactly, perfect. The third one is stunt, and it's basically people photographing themselves, taking this stunt and jumping and doing all these acrobatic moves with their car. So basically it's like, look at me, look what I have, look how cool I am. But the fourth one is the most interesting one, and this, I don't know if you can answer your question, but it's people taking photographs of glitches within the game. So they break the game either deliberately or they encounter glitches. And it's when the machine breaks, when there's a mistake, and you see something wrong, the polygons don't fit, the car is just weird looking, the characters are all deformed, and they And this is when the machine comes, the machinic part of photography, the structure, the dispositive becomes visible, and you want to document that. And to me, that's the pure in-game photography, because you can do all the other things with traditional, machines, but you don't have glitches in real life. Maybe you have, but they're not the same thing. When the machine breaks and all the blah blah, and you want to document that, that's for me, it's like the real.
The indexical, the
Yes.
documenting reality.
Exactly.
Right?
Bart would be proud. Exactly. That's it. That's it.
That's really
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah, that's really something actually. We should have included that as well. I think in the cluster. I don't want this to go on for too long. I know that Duncan is already giving me the look. And yeah, okay. I think it's a good idea to open it up for questions. If you want to use this fake microphone also, because I mean we did it for the camera sound. Actually, it has a purpose of some kind.
Does anyone have?
Thank you.
So I talk into the fake microphone as well?
Yes, sure.
It's your rock star moment.
Okay. Now I just wonder, not really playing video games myself, I wonder how are these images shared, or where do you do your research? Where do you find these images? Are they shared through social media platforms, or are there platforms inside of the video games that allow players to share the images? And what is the kind of purpose behind sharing them, and with what communities?
Matteo, maybe you want to answer this one?
Sure, very quickly. All of the above, they're shared through social media, they're shared on Flickr, they're shared on private gated communities, kind of like websites, like Xbox Live, for example. There's Forza has a huge number of photographers that are distributed only through this channel. They're actually, but to me the best source is forums, online forums of specific games where actually players compete with each other to have the best photographs. They rate each other, and your reputation is built upon your photography skills.
But in a way, it's the same that happens with the forums of traditional photography,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
also what you were talking about of photographing the selfies or photograph the brand. I think it's a reflection of how we are.
Absolutely.
That in the digital we relate, or we do the same things in a way that we do in the physical world. Maybe they allow us to find some glitches that in the physical we cannot find, and that's what they surprise us and we decide to photograph them.
Right.
But I think it's like a nice mirror that everything gets reflected.
I think in terms of communities, yeah, it's very true. I noticed, at least in the research that I've made, that you have like groups of people who list the specs of their computers and get like the highest definition possible and resolution. And I think in some interviews I saw that they said that in the community of Dead End Thrills, for example, photoshopping is frowned upon. So
Right.
it's not,
Cheating.
It's cheating, yeah.
Cheating, yes.
Unless it's a glitch.
Right. Right.
So,
right.
in other communities, they specify. I think there's this Flickr group it's called Landscape Photographer of Blaine County, which is a Grand Theft Auto
Character?
place. Yeah. They say, please Photoshop your picture nicely so that they look nice. Don't post dead bodies, but nice landscape, please. So you have all these different communities, I think, that they share in different places and have very specific and different interests and attitudes that, as you said, I think you can kind of trace at least the lineage to some existing group in traditional photography as well,
so
or
in
street
some,
photographies or...
In some forums of traditional photography, they also sign their post saying, I have a Canon 5D Mark II plus and this objective and all this stuff.
Or the ban on the raw files by the WordPress photo, right? It kind of reminds this Dead End Thrills ban on the photoshopping.
I have a question.
Sorry, I have to... Okay.
I have a question about the portraits of the desktops. It's much more intimate to make a screenshot of somebody's desktop than to photograph his face. So, and some of the desktops are not really something that I assume people will be sort of like ready to show at work when you look at the background images. So what were the reaction of the users when you're asking and approaching them with a question to make a portrait of their like intimate space?
No, I was going like one by one. I was presenting myself, telling them that I was like trying to document the event and the users, all this stuff. And And all of them, they did not change anything, or they were open to me to take a screenshot.
So
And
you're not like pushing icons away?
no. And I think that's a nice point, because I think that when you photograph someone's face, he's being photographed, and that can change maybe his attitude. And I think that the desktop is being built after days and days, and it's like a portrait, no? But it's not that what you, the point you, no, they did allow me to. And actually at the beginning I was, the original idea, that I have it, but I decided I was making also a portrait of them with a Polaroid camera, and the idea was to have like the desktop and the portrait of the owner. But at the end, I decided to remove the physical portraits, because I was more interested to photograph them through their digital environment or their displays. Yeah, I don't know if I did answer your question, but okay.
How's your desktop?
The majority of the desktops, did they come from men?
Well, in this event, the rate is like 70-30, something like that. There are some, 30% women too. And as you can see in Forza different patterns, there are also different patterns in some have the girlfriend, some have the mascot, some ones have some kind of porn star, some can have, there are some patterns too.
What's on your desktop?
My desktop is gray as I am.
Is it messy?
Yeah.
How many folders?
I used to do this trick of putting all the stuff inside the folder called desktop, and I did the two. But then you can start opening folders, and there are like, I don't know.
I have one folder called Under the Carpet, because it's like when you're...
Okay, yeah, the same. I guess that many people do this
There was
trick.
this other photographer platform who presented a book. Do you remember her? She had her mom's hard disk,
Yes, Vendula.
Pendula, and her mom's had this folder called Everything, and then one called Everything 2. I thought it was great. Sorry. More questions?
Come on.
Sure.
Can I ask a sort of provocative question, which would be to suggest that this kind of image making here, in-game photography, has actually very little to do with photography and much more to do with the aesthetics of the screenshot. And in fact, we need to begin to think about this kind of image production in a new way that has actually very little to do with the traditions of photography, but has more to do with the traditions of kind of image making within the sphere of the screen and within the sphere of digital aesthetics as defined by the computer.
But we should define what photography is, no? Before? What do you understand for photographic?
I don't want to go into
We have to lunch again.
I think that I would not make such a strong contrast between the tradition of screenshot and the tradition of photography. I think, as we've seen, there's a remediation of photography. Somebody called it mutation in one of the essays we have in the bibliography. There's something that somehow is carried from one tradition to the other, and I think the interesting thing, and that's why we are here today, is that there is this kind of gray area that we cannot really define where one ends and where the other starts. I think also this is also the beautiful ambiguity of Canchili's work, where you have these moments of really game polygons and this photographic grain, that it's really what's suggesting this bridge between these two worlds. I mean, that's my opinion.
No, I agree with actually Duncan. I shouldn't say it, but Kittler says that media defines our situations, and the computer, introduces a new set of parameters and criteria to evaluate it. And like McLuhan say, we always look at the future, we look in the rearview mirror. So we're talking about screenshotting by using the metaphor of the photographic medium, because it's the one we're most familiar with. But I think we need to reinvent sort of like the language to understand what is really new about this and what is not. And I think we're getting there, but we're still sort of like looking back rather than looking forward.
Mm-hmm. But isn't that a bit necessary too?
Oh, definitely. It's inevitable when video games were launched, they were called interactive cinema. Even though video games have nothing to do with cinema, but we still think of cinema because the medium we're mostly familiar with, and television was like film on a smaller screen, but it's not. And the film was like theater on a recorded. But we use all these metaphors, and we still use like in-game photography right now.
Yeah.
But it's probably misleading, I think.
Yeah, sure. And it also this kind of an umbrella that, as we've seen, incorporates so many
You're right.
different
There's so many
things.
different practices.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, so I think that if there's no more questions, we can end up the discussion here, and I'd like to thank again Matteo and Roc for joining me tonight in this super interesting conversation, and we can continue to discuss it now
With a beer.
with a beer and without the fake microphone.
Exactly.
Thanks again.
Thank you.